peeps, Anna here from Disrupt Tutoring, and as always, such a pleasure to join you. Today we're going to be dealing with a grade 9 Natural Sciences Matter and Materials question taken from the November 2013 ECE question paper. So let's dive straight in. We're looking at question number 11 of that question paper, and it's based on the extract that's up here. Now, whenever you're dealing with questions that have extracts or comprehension passages, it's advisable to read them twice, at least twice, so you can get the gist of what's happening and you'll be able to answer the questions. But because we're helping each other along for this one, I'm going to just read it once, then we'll go into the questions. Okay? It reads, Asanda's grandfather likes to bake his own bread. Asanda noticed that after he makes the dough, he leaves it in the sun to rise. Asanda wanted to know why it was necessary to leave the dough in the sun. She thought that it might have something to do with temperature. She decided to conduct an investigation. She made some dough with 100 grams of flour, 2 grams of sugar, 4 grams of dried yeast, and 25 milliliters of water at 38 degrees Celsius. She placed 10 milliliters of dough into each of 3 measuring cylinders. One cylinder was kept at 5 degrees Celsius, one at 20 degrees Celsius, and the third cylinder at 35 degrees Celsius. Asanda then left the dough for 20 minutes and measured how much the dough had risen in each measuring cylinder. She recorded the results as follows. The next is given this table, which shows the temperature and the volume of rise at each respective temperature. And we see here that 5 degrees Celsius had the least rise and 35 degrees Celsius had the most rise. Okay, now let's look at question number 11.1, which asks, what is the aim of this experiment? So now, the first thing we know about this experiment is that it's based on respiration, because when you're making bread dough, the yeast feeds on the carbohydrates in the mix to produce carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is the substance that causes the dough to rise. So Asanda's experiment, the aim of the experiment was to study the effect of temperature on carbon dioxide production, because what she varied was the temperature of each of the different cylinders. Okay, which leads us into the next part of the question, which asks write any 2 variables that were kept the same by Asanda in the experiment. There's quite a number of them that she did keep the same. Let's have a look at which those were. First of all, she kept the ingredients the same in each of the experiments. She kept the quantities of each of the ingredients the same. She let the experiments run for exact same time, and the start temperature of each of the experiments was also the same, where it says here that it was 25 milliliters of water at 38 degrees Celsius. So the start temperature of the experiment was the same. Okay, so any 2 of those variables will be sufficient to get you the marks for this question. 11.3 asks, do you think this was a fair test? Yes, this was a fair test. Why? Because all the other variables except the temperature, which was what we're investigating anyway, were kept the same throughout the experiment. Okay, and then we go on to 11.4, which asks us to draw a line graph to show the results of the investigation. Let's go on and do that. Don't forget to give a heading or a title to your line graph. Okay, and a line graph, as the name implies, has to be a line. And another thing to consider when you're drawing your line graph, make sure you got your axes correct. Pay attention to what you're putting on the y-axis, in this instance the volume the dough rose, and what you're putting on your x-axis, and in this instance the temperature. Okay, be sure also to remember to label your axis. Be sure also to use a scale that is appropriate to what you are investigating, something that won't distort the shape of your graph. Okay, and finally, pay attention to the shape of your graph. All right, so here we have a line graph showing the volume of dough rose, and as it depends on the temperature as given in the table that we had in the previous diagram. Right, so that's that for question number 11. But before I go, I'd like to say a very special thank you to our epic sponsor for making this video possible. You can read about them in the description below. Also, be sure to head over to our website for more of these epic tutorial videos. If you can't find the answer to your question, you can send us the question and we'll respond with a personalized video just for you. Now, until the next time, stay epic.